Good morning. General Ashcroft, colleagues, we gather this morning in the Great Hall to talk about the Department of Justice, what the Department of Justice must do to safeguard the security and freedom of our fellow citizens. Nearly 2 months ago, we experienced horrific atrocities on our soil. Since then, we have been fully engaged as a department to marshal the resources of federal law enforcement to counter and thwart the individuals and organizations that mean to harm us. And it has been an awesome activity to behold. And no one has labored more mightily in this great effort than Attorney General John Ashcroft. From the beginning of this crisis, he has devoted himself to pursuing every avenue to maximize the Department of Justice's contribution to our nation's security. For several weeks after the attacks on September 11th, General Ashcroft operated exclusively out of the FBI's Strategic Information and Operations Center, or SIOC as it is called, where he could monitor developments more closely and provide more immediate direction to our responsibility and to our responses. Although he now operates again from his office at Main Justice, I can assure you that his dedication to overseeing the department's response to this national challenge has been relentless. Under General Ashcroft's leadership, we have established a new paradigm for the role of law enforcement and the mission of the Department of Justice that takes proper account of the unique and deadly threats that confront our nation. I am proud to serve alongside him, and I'm privileged to introduce him to you, my colleagues, this morning. General Ashcroft.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Attorney General Thompson. I want to take this opportunity in front of this unprecedented audience to thank you, and I do it in front of people who have dedicated themselves to service. Your own dedicated and selfless service to the nation is mirrored in the lives of these with whom we meet today, and I'm grateful for it. Your heritage of justice involvement, spanning several decades now, is a model which I will seek to follow. You've been a courageous leader of this department, faithful servant to the President of the United States, and a dogged advocate of justice. We're all grateful for your effort. Thank you. I took it as a sign that we are making the difficult adjustments necessary for living with the threat of terrorism when Saturday Night Live decided to parody one of my press conferences this weekend. I don't know if you saw it or not. I didn't. But I'm told I was portrayed as urging Americans to go about their normal lives by doing everyday things like, quote, going to the gas mask store, accepting new realities, it is said, begins with laughter. Well, just as the American people have had to accept new challenges, I must now accept that Darrell Hammond does a reasonably accurate impression of me. I stand in awe here in this great hall, aware of our predecessors who have dedicated themselves to the pursuit of justice. We build on their heritage, the men and women who were the trust busters of the 20th century, who safeguarded our nation's internal security from fascists and communists, who declared a legal war on organized crime, the mafia bosses and corrupt political machines, and who crusaded for every American's equality and civil rights. Their victories built the foundation upon which we now stand. They help to secure the liberties we must now safeguard from terrorism. The Justice Department today may be more complex, but our mission must be just as clear as it was for our predecessors. On Sunday, it will be 2 months since the President's words, in his words, the nation was awakened to danger and called to defend freedom by a terrorist assault on our homeland. The attacks of September 11th have redefined the mission of the Department of Justice. Defending our nation and defending the citizens of America against terrorist attacks is now our first and overriding priority. To fulfill this mission, we are devoting all the resources necessary to eliminate terrorist networks, to prevent terrorist attacks, and to bring to justice those who kill Americans in the name of murderous ideologies. We are engaged in an aggressive arrest and detention campaign of lawbreakers with a single objective: to get terrorists off the street before they can harm more Americans. We have modeled our tactics after a previous Justice Department fighting a different threat in this same nation. The Justice Department of Robert F. Kennedy, it was said, would arrest a mobster for spitting on the sidewalk if it would help in the fight against organized crime. In the war on terror, it is the policy of this Department of Justice to be equally aggressive in protecting Americans. We will arrest and detain any suspected terrorist who has violated our laws. Suspects without links to terrorism or who are not guilty of violations of the law will not be detained. But terrorists who are in violation of the law will be convicted. In some cases, they'll be deported. In all cases, they'll be prevented from doing further harm to Americans. In the Department of Justice's fight against terrorism, the American people have been our valued and trusted and indispensable ally. Our partners in state and law enforcement have been our eyes and ears and muscle on the ground. For 2 months, America has been subjected to constant terrorist threats based on credible intelligence. 2 periods of extremely high threat have passed. For 2 months, we've endured the videotaped tauntings of Osama bin Laden. For 2 months, Americans have had their lives disrupted, and law enforcement has had to work overtime, to say the least. Through dozens of warnings to law enforcement, a deliberate campaign of terrorist disruption, tighter security, and potential targets, tighter security around potential targets, and over 1,000 arrests and detention. This has only made America stronger. It has inspired us. It has united us. We now know that we can and will prevail. We cannot know with certainty what acts of terrorism our combined efforts have thwarted or prevented. But we have trusted the American people to act responsibly in the face of threats. And thanks to their patience and to their vigilance, we know this: we have not suffered another major terrorist attack. The home front has witnessed the opening battle in the war against terrorism, and America has emerged victorious. The opening battle has passed, but the war ahead will be long. The weeks, the months, and years to come will impose additional burdens and will call for additional sacrifice. Just as our servicemen and women are risking their lives to battle the enemy overseas, it falls to the men and women of justice and law enforcement to lead America in the battle against the enemy at home. The war on terrorism has required adjustments by the American people, and so too we must adjust. Our new mission requires a new way of doing business. When terrorism threatens our future, we cannot afford to live in the past. We must focus on our core mission and responsibilities, understanding that the department will not be all things to all people. We cannot do everything we once did because lives now depend on us doing a few things very well. We must strive to maximize our potential even as we recognize our limitations. The men and women of the Justice Department are the finest legal minds and law enforcement officers in the world. But we cannot win this battle alone. We must forge new relationships of cooperation and trust with our partners in state and local law enforcement. Bureaucratic turf battles must cease when terrorists threaten the very ground beneath our feet. Today, I am announcing a wartime reorganization and mobilization of the nation's justice and law enforcement resources to meet the mission of the Department of Justice. The Department of Justice's strategic plan for fiscal years 2001 to 2006 is a carefully crafted blueprint for the comprehensive reorganization of the department to meet our new anti-terrorism mission. It is the product of close consultation with the Deputy Attorney General, whom I have asked to lead this effort. I have asked him to lead it with the assistance of the Strategic Management Council. This afternoon, I will discuss with the Strategic Management Council how we will develop necessary measures necessary to accomplish this plan's goals. I will submit this new strategic plan to Congress today. The plan being announced today contains 10 new initiatives for the systematic reform and restructuring of the Department of Justice. It is a blueprint for change. It is also a call to you, the men and women of the Justice Department, to embrace fully our new mission, that we would together commit ourselves to rebuilding and remaking the department, to rededicate ourselves to the highest and most noble form of public service, the preservation of American lives and liberty. The reforms and restructuring we must undertake in the next 5 years are designed first and foremost to sharpen the capacity of the Department of Justice to act deliberately and decisively in support of our mission. Our first initiative is the elimination of waste and the retargeting of resources to fight against terrorism. In today's Justice Department, multiple agencies perform similar functions. Within 6 months, we must have in place a detailed plan to streamline, eliminate, or consolidate duplicative functions. We should not expect our budgets to give us limitless resources. We must protect Americans regardless of the level of the resources provided by OMB and Congress. We should take responsibility ourselves to find ways to get our jobs done. Second, we will refocus our resources on frontline positions. The war on terrorism will not be fought in Washington, but in the field by agents, prosecutors, investigators, and analysts. Our long-term goal is to transfer 10% of the current headquarters-based positions to the field, to field offices where citizens are served and where America is protected. Our restructuring initiatives are demanding and they're service-oriented. The third point of our plan challenges us to hold each other accountable. Performance should be measured by outcomes and results, not by inputs. Fourth, we must attract a diverse, high-quality workforce to the department and train ourselves to be the best trained and best and most talented workforce in the world. Fifth, we must develop a seamless relationship with state and local law enforcement agencies. Sixth, we must have information technology from this decade, not from several generations ago, so that we can share intelligence and have the interoperability that a coordinated response to terrorism demands. Major city police departments are better equipped today than is the Justice Department. Finally, the remaining points of our strategic plan mandate fundamental change in several of the most critical components of American justice and law enforcement. starting with the organization that is at the center of our counterterrorism effort, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. In its history, the FBI has been many things: the protector of our institutions when they were under assault from organized crime, the keeper of our security when it was threatened by international espionage, and the defender of our civil rights when they were denied to some Americans on the basis of their race, color, or creed. Today, the American people call upon the Federal Bureau of Investigation to put prevention of terrorism at the center of its law enforcement and national security efforts. Since September the 11th, Director Mueller has been engaged in a thorough review of the FBI, its management, its organization. Under the plan being announced today, the Strategic Management Council will develop and implement a series of reforms to and with the FBI. We expect preliminary recommendations for reform by the end of this year. Our strategic plan also restructures the Immigration and Naturalization Service, consistent with the President's goal of separating the function of serving and the function of enforcing. Of course, we have the responsibility to protect the borders of the United States as well. Commissioner Ziegler has already launched substantial effort, devoted significant resources to the development of a strategy of reforming the INS, and I expect that plan soon to be unveiled. As a nation of immigrants, the United States will continue to welcome America's friends, but we will not allow our welcome to be abused by America's enemies. In the war on terrorism, the restructured Immigration and Naturalization Service will focus on preventing aliens who engage in or support terrorist activity from entering our country. It will lead the campaign to detain, prosecute, or deport terrorist aliens who are already inside the nation's borders. In either case, the Department of Justice will not allow terrorists to use our hospitality as a weapon against the American people. The Department's Office of Justice Programs and Grant Management System also will be fundamentally restructured to meet our new anti-terrorism mission. I will submit a plan for restructuring our grant programs to Congress within a month. Not only will we make our grant process more efficient, more accountable, we will target our resources to maximize the public benefit. State and local law enforcement, victims groups, and others on the front lines in the war against terrorism will have improved access to services and information from this Justice Department. And while we tackle the institutional barriers to the realization of our anti-terrorism mission, we will address the legal and cultural barriers as well. In his remarks, Deputy Attorney General Thompson will describe the actions we are taking today to implement new tools passed by Congress in the USA Patriot Act. This landmark anti-terrorism legislation contains provisions that begin to break down the barriers to information sharing, to communication and cooperation between and within the intelligence and law enforcement communities. Today, I am issuing a series of directives to the Department of Justice component heads, requesting that they review information in their possession that may now be shared with other federal agencies, and to do so where appropriate. I have also directed that components assess their intelligence analysis capabilities, improve those analysis capabilities where necessary, and coordinate their efforts with other affected federal agencies and with state and local law enforcement officials. In this war on terror, information sharing and cooperation are critical to our strategic mission and to our victory. Terrorists live in the shadows, under the cover of darkness. In order to identify, capture, to incapacitate them, law enforcement investigators and intelligence agents must be able to work cooperatively. Under our new anti-terrorism mandate, there will be maximum dissemination to the fullest extent permitted by law of appropriate terrorist-related information to all federal officials engaged in the common fight against terrorism. Such dissemination will occur regardless of whether the source of information is a criminal investigation or a counterintelligence investigation. The Department of Justice is fully committed to breaking down the bureaucratic and cultural barriers that prevent meaningful coordination and cooperation between criminal law enforcement and the counterintelligence operations, both within the department and between the department and other federal intelligence agencies. In just a short time, 2 months on Sunday, the men and women of American justice and law enforcement have risen once again to answer the call to duty. I thank you. The nation thanks you for the sacrifices that you have made and for your willingness to defend freedom with the law. Like the men and women of World War II, the greatest generation, your sacrifice and that of your families is a testimony to the American spirit, a quiet but determined show of faith in the rightness of our cause, the endurance of freedom, and the certainty of justice. At the conclusion of World War II came the reckoning at Nuremberg. Former Attorney General and Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson led the prosecution of 21 Nazi defendants for crimes against their countrymen, against their neighbors, indeed crimes against humanity. All pleaded not guilty. Some claimed that they were merely following orders. Others disputed the jurisdiction of the court. But Jackson successfully argued their guilt with a sense of urgency born of a civilization threatened by a new force of evil. Quote, "The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated, so malignant, and so devastating," said Jackson, "that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored because it cannot survive their being repeated. It is now, as it was then, a calculated, malignant, and devastating evil has arisen in the world. Civilization cannot ignore the wrongs that have been done. America will not tolerate their being repeated. Justice has a new mission, a new calling against an old evil. I thank you for your hard work. I thank you for your leadership. God bless the United States of America."
Thank you, General Ashcroft. As the General said, we stand at a critical juncture in the life of our nation and this department. The threat of international terrorism that we confront today is unlike any challenge we have faced in our history. And I might add, it's unlike any challenge that all of us in this room have faced in our personal and professional lives. I'm sure that you would agree with me that all of us, from General Ashcroft to the person who works in our mailroom, all of us have never worked on or for a cause as righteous as we are working on now in our fight against terrorism on behalf of our fellow citizens. Terrorism poses a challenge both to our national security and to our criminal justice system. America's response to terrorism must therefore deploy the full resources of the national security and criminal justice communities. We must tear down the bureaucratic walls that separate component from component and department from department. We must instill a new culture of cooperation, and we must be guided by shared objectives, not parochial organizational interest. As the Attorney General has emphasized, we in the Department of Justice must focus our efforts on preventing terrorists from committing additional atrocities, not simply on investigating and prosecuting crimes once they have been committed. Our overriding priority is to ensure that all necessary and appropriate steps are taken to protect our fellow citizens, to prevent further attacks, and to disrupt terrorist cells before they can do more harm, even if it means potentially compromising a criminal prosecution or civil case. Although we are facing unprecedented challenges, I am confident that America and the Department of Justice are more than equal to them. The recently enacted U.S Patriot Act, which the President signed into law on October 26, arms us with new and vital weapons in our war on terror. These new weapons will enable us to coordinate with other federal agencies in our common quest to neutralize terrorists before they strike again. One of the Act's most important features is that it breaks down barriers that have historically prevented the intelligence and law enforcement communities from sharing information with each other that could be critical to preventing terrorist attacks. Before the Act was passed, federal law restricted prosecutors' ability to share with the intelligence community information obtained in grand jury testimony or from a criminal wiretap. Evidence about an impending terrorist threat that was presented to the grand jury, for instance, could not be shared with the CIA. In situations where additional time spent identifying and tracking down terrorists could cost people's lives, this limitation was a significant obstacle to preventing future terrorist attacks. Under the new law enforcement officers may now share grand jury and wiretap information regarding foreign intelligence with a wide range of federal personnel, including U.S. immigration authorities and members of the intelligence and national defense communities. Even before the U.S. Patriot Act's new authorities became available, the Justice Department took strong steps to facilitate the sharing of information among governmental agencies. Days after the September 11 attacks, the Attorney General instructed all department officials, including all federal prosecutors and law enforcement agents, to share with appropriate federal, state, and local officials any information that exposes a credible threat to the safety of the American people or the national security of our country. All Department of Justice components were put on notice that the pursuit of a criminal investigation, the zeal to obtain a conviction, or the desire to protect the source should not override the need to protect the lives of our fellow citizens. In recent weeks, the President has consistently stressed that the overriding priority of our department and of the national government must be to disrupt and prevent future terrorist attacks. We have also instituted a daily summary by the FBI of significant developments in the terrorism investigation, including information developed through grand jury investigations. Since the enactment of the new law, these summaries, including any relevant grand jury and Title III wiretap information, are being distributed daily to the CIA and other relevant agencies. These new information sharing authorities will be effective, however, only if our prosecutors can identify and exploit useful national security information. Today, the Department is taking steps to ensure that law enforcement personnel are properly trained to use all the available resources in the war on terrorism, particularly those resources designed to identify and help us understand foreign intelligence and with whom to share it for prompt analysis and follow-up. The anti-terrorism coordinators in the U.S. Attorney's offices will meet for a national training session next week, which will incorporate the legislation's new information sharing powers. Now, if we are to prevail in our war on terror, it is not enough for the right hand simply to know what the left hand is doing. The right hand must also assist the left hand in accomplishing its task. The new legislation enables federal officials to cooperate in precisely that way by facilitating cooperation between law enforcement officers and intelligence officers under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. Historically, this act, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, or FISA as we call it, has unduly limited coordination between prosecutors in the Justice Department's Criminal Division and FBI investigators by restricting their ability to share information and advice with each other and to consult with each other. The USA Patriot Act eases these restrictions. For example, the Act expressly authorizes intelligence agents conducting FISA surveillance to consult with federal law enforcement officers in order to coordinate their efforts to prevent terrorist attacks. And important as this coordination is the ability of the FBI investigators to seek advice from officials and prosecutors in our criminal division in order to carry on this important prevention and disruption effort. This coordination is critical if we are to enhance the federal government's capacity to prevent terrorist attacks. In addition, the Act permits the use of FISA authorities where foreign intelligence is a significant purpose of an investigation. The previous requirement was that the intelligence be the investigation's primary purpose. This change will facilitate communication and coordination between counterintelligence and criminal investigators. The Department will not, however, use FISA for the purpose of investigating routine criminal offenses by domestic criminals. Finally, the Department has taken quick action to implement the USA Patriot Act's emphasis on preventing and disrupting terrorist acts by conducting a comprehensive review of our existing guidelines for national security and criminal investigations. These guidelines, which provide field agents with critical guidance on when and how to open investigations, were created in a bygone era of law enforcement. We are taking a fresh, hard look at these guidelines to ensure that our agents and investigators can take full advantage of the new authorities in the USA Patriot Act. For example, prior to the passage of the Act, if a foreign police official reported important information to an American intelligence official, the matter typically was opened as an intelligence investigation, and little, if any, of the information ever made its way to the criminal investigators. And if the information was first reported as a criminal investigation, this pattern was repeated with little information going to intelligence officials. The new law has largely eliminated these barriers to information sharing, and we are reassessing our guidelines accordingly. We will ensure that our guidance to our agents and investigators reflects our new priorities: a full and effective information sharing in order to prevent and disrupt terrorist activities. In closing, I want to reaffirm that the Department of Justice is committed to supporting our government's common mission in this war against terrorism. We did not seek this. We did not seek this war, but we will fight it. We will fight it with every weapon in our arsenal within the rule of law. There will be maximum sharing to the fullest extent permitted by law of terrorist-related information with all federal officials engaged in our joint fight against terrorism. We will break down, as the Attorney General said, the bureaucratic and cultural barriers that prevent meaningful cooperation between Justice Department and federal intelligence agencies, as well as within our department itself. And we will devote every resource to frustrating the plans of the terrorist before they can claim another innocent American life. I know we can count on each of you to commit yourself fully to this important and critical, and as I said, even righteous effort. I look forward to working with you, and thank you so much for your attention this morning.